My town's creepy delivery driver turned out to be a superhero in a Domino's uniform. I live in the middle of nowhere, in a town where not even DoorDash dares to come deliver food. So instead, our neighborhood has one assigned delivery driver, and ours was Pandy, a replacement for our old one who randomly disappeared and abandoned the role. My parents told me that he was a man who only wanted one thing from women, and when I asked them what they meant, my dad just glared at me with daggering eyes. Mr. Frank said he was spending a lot of time asking his wife questions, running his greedy eyes up and down her body. My head was immediately filled with an image of Pandy catcalling women and saying things like, "Grab her by the pie," with other ex-frat boys who peaked in college. And, as they say, there is a fine line between hate and obsession. So over the next few weeks, I watched Pandy like a hawk. I checked his Facebook every day without ever friending him, and pretended to look busy while I drove around every night trailing behind him. And that's when I noticed a detail that everyone else had somehow missed. He only lingered in the houses of married women. Huge eye bags, back-combed hair, puffy faces from crying. Basically the postpartum depressed mom archetype, never the single and pretty ones. And I was never close enough to hear full conversations, but I always caught snippets. Bruise cream works better if you actually report why you need it. There's cash hidden in the pizza boxes, document everything, were all things I heard him say. None of it made sense, and as soon as the conversation started, it ended, because the women's husbands would come out and politely tell him to F off, as they should. The next week, I was at my friend Yasmin's house when her parents started fighting upstairs. Normal for them, no big deal. But then came the crash. Her mom tumbling down the stairs, her dad standing at the top, fists clenched. "You didn't see anything," her dad said with a smirk. "She's clumsy, always falling." My entire body was screaming at me to run. I should go," I stammered, but he locked the door. "Number, you're staying until she wakes up and tells you herself how clumsy she is." His hand wrapped around my arm, the same grip I'd seen him use on his wife. "Sit down." I'm not sure how much time passed, but it felt like hours. Emma's mom stirred but couldn't stand. Her dad wouldn't let us call 911. "She's fine," he kept saying, pacing with a beer bottle in his hand. Yasmin cried silently. That's when the doorbell rang. It was Pandy. "Yasmin's family, I got your usual order." Yasmin's dad yanked the door open. "We didn't order anything. Says right here," Pandy interrupted, pushing past him. When his eyes landed on Yasmin's mom on the floor, they widened, but he didn't say anything. I broke the silence. "Hey, Pandy, you should totally give me a ride home." My voice was overly cheery, trying to compensate for the tension. As soon as we got into his car, I was hyperventilating. He did box breathing exercises with me, and once I could speak again, I asked him what would happen to Yasmin. He didn't say anything, just whipped out his big black iPhone and started playing a voice recording. Turns out, he had put a mini microphone in the pizza box to make sure she was okay. And she was. "Let's call an ambulance for Yasmin's mom." "No," he responded sternly. "The entire ambulance and police department won't believe me, and they'll punish me for spreading rumors." And since I was too young for them to believe me too, I had to wait until he dropped me home so I could tell my parents what happened. Turns out my parents were already waiting for me in the kitchen. "Yasmin's mom fell down the stairs," I blurted out. "Her dad pushed her. We need to call the ambulance." "You got in his car." My mom's voice was shrill. "That freak's car." "Mom, please listen. Yasmin's mom needs an ambulance. Her dad—" "I don't want to hear about what you think you saw," my dad chimed in. "What I want to hear is why you were alone with that man." "Dad, she could have internal bleeding. She couldn't even stand up." "Stop being dramatic," my mom snapped. "Yasmin's mom has always been clumsy. I won't hear another word." And I guess Pandy was able to pull some strings, because 5 minutes later I heard a police car driving up to Yasmin's house. I opened my window to eavesdrop. Her mom said in plain English, "No, I'm fine. It was all a misunderstanding." I watched as the police officer rolled his eyes. I knew it was just Pandy trying to start trouble. I felt so many emotions at once. Rage, sadness, grief, everything. But I didn't do anything. Not yet. The next morning, I started leaving anonymous notes in mailboxes. Simple warnings scribbled on torn notebook paper. "Your husband is planning a guys' night Thursday. Be careful." I'd overheard Mr. Frank and 3 other men at the hardware store talking about their weekly poker games, laughing about how their wives never questioned where they went. My hands shook as I slipped the last note into Mrs. Chen's mailbox before school. That afternoon, my father found my journal. I'd been documenting everything. Dates, times, bruises I'd noticed, conversations I'd overheard. He stormed into my room holding the leather-bound book like evidence of a crime. "What is this?" His face was red, veins bulging in his neck. "Creative writing for school," I said quickly, my heart pounding. "Ms. Peterson said we should write what we observe, make it realistic." He flipped through pages, reading my detailed notes about Pandy's visits, the women's injuries, the patterns I'd noticed. His jaw clenched tighter with each page. "This better be fiction," he said finally, tossing the journal on my bed. "And I don't want you writing about our neighbors anymore. It's disrespectful." 2 days later, Pandy's car was vandalized. Someone had slashed all 4 tires and spray-painted "pervert" across the windshield. I watched from my bedroom window as he stood there, shaking his head. The next day, he showed up in a hit-up Honda. The day after that, a borrowed pickup truck. Each vehicle change made him harder to track, which I realized might have been intentional. My mother found the burner phone on a Wednesday. Pandy had given it to me after the incident at Yasmin's house, said I should have a way to call for help that couldn't be monitored. She held it up at dinner like a smoking Gian. "Care to explain this?" "I found it at school." I lied, but she wasn't buying it. "You're having an affair with that delivery man," she said, her voice deadly quiet. "My own daughter, sneaking around with a grown man." "Mom, that's not—" "You're grounded. Indefinitely. School and home, that's it, and I'm keeping this." She pocketed the phone. My father nodded approvingly, adding that he'd be driving me to and from school personally. Sunday's church potluck was torture. I sat between my parents watching the crowd. That's when I noticed it. Mrs. Frank, Mrs. Chen, and Mrs. Williams exchanging quick glances across the fellowship hall. Subtle nods. Mrs. Williams tapped her watch. Mrs. Chen held up 3 fingers. Mrs. Frank touched her nose. They were planning something. After church, Yasmin pulled me aside in the parking lot. Her mother's arm was in a sling. Another fall, according to the official story. My mom's been recording him, she whispered urgently. She has an old camcorder hidden in the laundry room. Hours of footage. That's amazing. She's too scared to do anything with it. Yasmin cut me off. But I thought you should know. My father installed tracking apps on all my devices that night. For your safety, he said, though we both knew it was about control. I discovered them when my phone started overheating and the battery drained in 2 hours. Every website I visited, every call I made, every text I sent, he could see it all. The library became my refuge. They had old computers that barely worked, but they weren't tracked. I created new email accounts, researched domestic violence resources, printed information about escape plans. Mrs. Henderson, the librarian, never asked questions when I cleared the browser history. Pandy started teaching me self-defense during his delivery stops. Quick lessons while he pretended to have trouble finding the right change. Thumb to the eye, he demonstrated with his hand nowhere near my face. Knee to the groin, heel to the instep. Always aim for soft spots. He taught me pressure points that could drop a grown man, escape techniques for different kinds of grips. The neighborhood watch formed 2 weeks later. My father was elected captain, naturally. Their stated mission was to monitor suspicious delivery activities, but everyone knew they meant Pandy. They created schedules, took photos of every delivery, timed how long he spent at each house. My father hung a map in our garage with pins marking suspicious activity. I made a discovery that changed everything. My mother had old bruises. I saw them when she reached for a high shelf and her sleeve rode up, faded yellow marks in the shape of fingers. Suddenly her compliance made sense. Her anger at me wasn't about protecting me from Pandy. It was about protecting herself from my father. Mrs. Morrison left her husband on a Tuesday. No warning, no explanation, just gone. Her husband came to our house that night, panicked and angry. She took the kids, he kept saying, cleaned out her personal account, left a note saying she was at her sister's. The other husbands gathered in our living room within an hour. Emergency meeting. They increased surveillance, added overnight shifts to the watch. No one else leaves, Mr. Ed Frank said. We need to know what our wives are planning. 2 days later, Mr. Frank caught me photographing bruises on his wife's arms. She'd been hanging laundry, and the morning sun highlighted the purple marks perfectly. His hand clamped down on my shoulder before I could delete the photos. Give me the phone, he said quietly. I handed it over, watched him delete everything. You're going to tell your father you've been acting promiscuous with boys at school. If you don't, I'll tell him myself, with some creative additions. Understand? I nodded, terrified. He smiled, satisfied. Good girl. Run along home. My mother's room searches became frequent after that. She found the domestic violence pamphlets hidden in my textbooks during one of her sweeps. I'd gotten them from the library, tucked between pages about the Revolutionary War. She held them up, hands shaking. Where did you get these? Health class, I said. We're doing a unit on don't lie to me. She threw them in the trash. Is this what that man has been filling your head with? These ideas? The breaking point came during dinner the following week. My mother had questioned my father about the credit card bill, some small charge he couldn't explain. His face went dark. He stood slowly, deliberately. Are you questioning me? I just wanted to know. His hand raised. My mother flinched, turning her face away, arms coming up protectively. A practiced motion, muscle memory. The hand didn't fall, but the threat hung in the air. I saw something break in my mother's eyes, not her spirit, her silence. She started helping me after that. Small things at first. Forgot to check my room one day. Left the library computer logged into her email. Slipped me a $20 bill for lunch when I hadn't asked. We never spoke about it directly, but understanding passed between us. Yasmin's mother joined our silent alliance. The 3 of us coordinated without words, using Pandy's delivery schedule as cover. He brought more than food. Hidden in pizza boxes and takeout bags were tiny cameras from an old electronics store that had closed down. Battery-powered, motion-activated, small enough to hide anywhere. We were in the middle of planning when Mr. Frank caught us. My mother and I were at his house, supposedly borrowing sugar. Yasmin's mother was there too, returning a casserole dish. We'd been careless, speaking too freely in the kitchen. He heard everything. The basement door slammed shut before I could react. The lock clicked. Stay put, Mr. Frank said through the door. I'm calling the others. We're going to sort this out properly. The basement was unfinished, concrete and exposed beams. One small window, too high and too small to escape through. I could hear him upstairs making calls. Yeah, got them all here. No, the delivery boy doesn't know yet. 20 minutes passed, 30. Then the doorbell rang. Pandy's voice drifted down. Delivery for Frank family. Extra large with everything. We didn't order anything, Mr. Frank said, but I could hear him opening the door. The crash was tremendous. Metal on metal, the screech of tires, car alarms blaring. Pandy's voice panicked. Oh God, I'm so sorry. I hit the gas instead of the brake. Is that your car? Mr. Frank's cursing faded as he ran outside. The basement door opened. Yasmin's mother stood there holding Mr. Frank's spare key. Window. Now. She boosted me up to the small window. I squeezed through, scraping my arms on the concrete, tumbling into the bushes outside. My mother was already there, pulling me to my feet. We ran. The abandoned gas station sat at the edge of town, a relic from before the interstate bypassed us. That's where they cornered Pandy an hour later. 7 men, including my father. They formed a circle around his borrowed car, baseball bats and tire irons in hand. You've been filling our wives' heads with poison, my father said, making them think they're victims? Well, it ends tonight. What they didn't know was that we were watching, hidden behind the old pumps in the boarded-up office, crouched in the overgrown weeds. 7 women with phones out, recording everything. Every threat, every raised weapon, every step they took toward Pandy. I just deliver food, Pandy said calmly, hands visible, making no sudden moves. If your wives are unhappy, maybe you should ask yourselves why. Mr. Frank swung first. Pandy dodged, but barely. The bat whistled past his head. The others closed in. That's when Mrs. Williams stood up from behind the pumps, phone held high. I've got everything recorded. Back off, now. The men froze. One by one, the other women emerged from hiding. My mother, Yasmin's mother, Mrs. Chen, Mrs. Roberts, Mrs. Taylor, even Rebecca, the police chief's wife, stepped out from the office, her phone trained on her own husband. Rebecca? The police chief's voice cracked. "What are you doing here?" "Something I should have done years ago," she said. Her eye was still bruised from last week's accident. She turned to the other women. "I've pulled every buried domestic violence report from the past 5 years. Every call that got dismissed. Every complaint that disappeared. I have copies of everything." The realization hit the men simultaneously. Their wives had been planning this. The money slowly moved to separate accounts. The evidence carefully documented. The safe places arranged. They'd been preparing for months, and we'd just forced their hand. "You can't all leave," Mr. Morrison said desperately. "You have nowhere to go. No money. The kids are already at my sister's." Mrs. Morrison's voice came from a phone screen. She was video calling from 2 towns over. "We've been planning this for months. All of us." The convoy left that night. 7 cars, packed with essentials. Pandy followed behind in his delivery car. Protection for the journey. The husband stood in the street, shouting threats about custody and money and reputations. Empty words from empty men. The county prosecutor lived 3 towns over, far enough to have no connections to our insular community. 7 packages arrived at her office over the next week. Videos, photos, medical records, police reports. Each woman had documented years of abuse. The evidence was overwhelming. My father tried to burn it all. I came home from school to find him in the backyard with a metal trash can, feeding papers into the flames. But my mother had anticipated this. She'd uploaded everything to USB drives weeks ago, hidden at her sister's house. The originals were just paper. The truth lived in the cloud now, backed up and protected. The men scrambled for explanations. 7 wives leaving on the same night? They tried spinning stories about cults, about brainwashing, about Pandy running some kind of scam. But the evidence spoke louder than their lies. Medical records showing patterns of injuries. Financial records showing controlled access to money. Police reports that had been filed and buried. 6 months later, I sat in my mother's new apartment. Smaller than our old house, but filled with light. No shadows here. The doorbell rang. Pandy with our weekly delivery. But now he was just a delivery driver who got invited in for coffee. "How's school?" he asked, settling at the kitchen table like an old friend. "Good," I said. "I'm writing again. Real stories this time." My mother smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "She's thinking about journalism, wants to tell stories that matter." Pandy nodded approvingly. "The world needs more truth tellers." Through the window, I could see Mrs. Chen watering flowers on her balcony next door. Mrs. Williams was teaching her daughter to ride a bike in the parking lot. Mrs. Frank was heading to her job at the bank, a job she never could have had before. "Any word from your father?" Pandy asked gently. "He sends letters," my mother said. "I don't open them." The legal battles would continue for years. Custody fights, financial disputes, restraining orders. But that was just paperwork. The real victory had already been won. 7 women and their children, free. A community of survivors, rebuilding. "I should go," Pandy said, finishing his coffee. "Lots of deliveries today." As he left, I thought about the woman who'd hired him, the one who'd recognized the need for someone like him in our isolated town, someone who could reach the unreachable, help the helpless. He never talked about her, but I knew she was out there somewhere, another survivor who'd turned her pain into purpose. My phone buzzed, Yasmin texting from her new school. "Movie tonight? My mom's making popcorn." I smiled, typing back. "Absolutely. Normal. We were learning to be normal, to make plans without permission, to speak without fear, to exist without apology. It wasn't the life we'd planned, but it was the life we'd chosen, and that made all the difference." The normalcy lasted exactly 3 days. I was walking to the corner store when a black sedan pulled up beside me. The window rolled down, revealing Mr. Frank's face, his jaw tight with barely contained rage. "Your mother thinks she's safe," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "But restraining orders are just pieces of paper. Remember that." The car peeled away before I could respond. My hands shook as I fumbled for my phone, but then I remembered. The restraining order hadn't gone through yet. The paperwork was still being processed. We were in a legal limbo, vulnerable. That night, strange things started happening at our apartment complex. Car alarms went off at random hours. Trash cans were overturned. Contents scattered across the parking lot. Someone kept calling our landline and hanging up when we answered. My mother tried to stay calm, but I could see the fear creeping back into her eyes. "Maybe we should move further away," she suggested over breakfast, her coffee mug trembling slightly in her hands. "We can't keep running," I said, though part of me wanted nothing more than to disappear completely. The harassment escalated quickly. Dead flowers appeared on our doorstep. Our mailbox was stuffed with printed photos of our old house, our old life, reminders of what we'd left behind. Someone keyed my mother's car, leaving deep scratches that spelled out a single word: LIAR. Mrs. Chen found a brick through her window one morning, a note attached: "Thieves get what they deserve." Mrs. Williams discovered her tires slashed for the 3rd time in a week. The message was clear. Leaving hadn't ended anything. It had only changed the battlefield. I started documenting everything again, this time using a hidden camera app on my phone. Every incident, every threat, every moment of intimidation. But when we tried to report it to the police in our new town, they seemed skeptical. "Without proof, it's your ex-husband's," the officer said, barely looking up from his paperwork. "There's not much we can do. Could be random vandalism." "Random vandalism that only targets 7 specific women who all left abusive marriages on the same night?" my mother asked, her voice sharp with frustration. The officer shrugged. "Coincidences happen. We were on our own again, but this time, we weren't alone." The 7 women started meeting every Tuesday at Mrs. Morrison's apartment. We called them strategy sessions, planning how to protect ourselves while waiting for the legal system to catch up. "They're trying to break us," Mrs. Morrison said during one meeting. "Make us come crawling back." "Never," Rebecca said firmly. She'd lost her access to police files, but not her determination. "We've come too far." Pandy still delivered to our area, but now he came with backup. His cousin Benji, a mountain of a man who worked construction. They traveled together, Benji sitting in the passenger seat like a bodyguard. The harassment continued, but at least Pandy was protected. One evening, Yasmin called me in tears. "My dad found out where we're staying. He's been driving by the apartment, just sitting in his car and watching." "Did you call the police?" "They said unless he tries to make contact, he's not breaking any laws. He's on public property. Her voice cracked. I'm scared. We implemented a buddy system. No one went anywhere alone. The kids walked to school in groups. The mothers coordinated their work schedules so someone was always available for emergencies. It felt like living in a siege, but at least we were together. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Henderson, the librarian from our old town, reached out through a secure email. She'd been quietly documenting things too, keeping records of which men checked out books about custody law, divorce proceedings, and more disturbing topics like how to prove parental alienation and winning custody from an unfit mother. I thought you should know, her email read. They're planning something. They've been meeting at the library after hours. I'm not supposed to have access to the security footage, but attached were several video files. The men huddled around a table, papers spread between them. We couldn't hear what they were saying, but their body language spoke volumes. They were coordinating, just like we were. My mother's hands clenched as she watched the footage. They're not going to stop, are they? No, I said quietly. They're not. The custody papers arrived 2 weeks later. All 7 fathers filing simultaneously, claiming abandonment, parental alienation, and unfitness. They'd hired a law firm from the city, expensive suits who specialized in fathers' rights. The paperwork was overwhelming. Psychological evaluation requests, financial audits, home inspections. They're trying to bury us in legal fees, Rebecca explained, flipping through her stack of documents. Drain our resources so we have to give up. But we'd learned from our time in captivity. We pooled our money, hired one lawyer to represent all of us. A young woman named Catherine who'd escaped an abusive marriage herself and now specialized in helping other survivors. She took our case at a reduced rate, understanding what we were up against. They're using the system as a weapon, Catherine explained during our first meeting. But the system can work both ways. She was right. The evidence we'd gathered, years of documentation, medical records, police reports, it all mattered now. The men had made a crucial mistake in taking us to court. They'd opened themselves up to legal scrutiny. The psychological evaluations were grueling. Hours of questions designed to find cracks in our stories, inconsistencies in our accounts. But we'd lived the truth. We didn't need to remember lies because we weren't telling any. How do you explain leaving in the middle of the night? The evaluator asked me during my session. How do you explain staying with someone who hurts you? I countered. We left when we felt safe enough to leave, when we had support. The home inspections were invasive but necessary. Strange officials walking through our small apartments, checking for adequate sleeping arrangements, proper food storage, safety measures. Our homes were modest but clean, filled with the kind of warmth that comes from feeling secure. The financial audits revealed something interesting. While the men claimed poverty, unable to pay fair support, the records showed different stories. Hidden accounts, expensive purchases, money spent on their legal team that could have gone to their children. During all of this, the harassment continued but evolved. Now it came in legal forms. Constant motions, repeated requests for documentation, depositions scheduled and rescheduled to disrupt work schedules, death by 1,000 paper cuts. But we evolved too. The older kids started helping with childcare so the mothers could work extra shifts. We shared meals to cut costs, babysat for each other, carpooled everywhere. What had started as 7 separate families became something stronger, a chosen family bound by shared experience. One night, exhausted from another deposition, I found my mother crying in the kitchen, not the silent tears of fear I'd grown up with, but full sobs of frustration. Maybe we should have stayed quiet, she said, endured it like our mothers did. No, I said firmly, wrapping my arms around her. Our mothers didn't have each other. We do. The real test came during the first custody hearing. All 7 cases were being heard together, the courtroom packed with familiar faces. The men sat on one side with their expensive lawyers. We sat on the other with Catherine and our boxes of evidence. Mr. Frank testified first, painting himself as a devoted father whose wife had been brainwashed by a predatory delivery driver. He spoke of his pain, his confusion, his desperate desire to reunite his family. If I hadn't seen him push his wife down the stairs, I might have believed him. Then Catherine played the recordings, Yasmin's mother's hidden camera footage, Rebecca's collection of buried police reports, the videos from the gas station confrontation. The courtroom fell silent as the truth played out on the screen. Your Honor, Catherine said, these men aren't fighting for their children. They're fighting for control. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes, watched everything carefully. She asked pointed questions, cutting through the lawyer's rhetoric to get to the truth. When she finally spoke, her words were measured but firm. I've seen many custody cases, she said, but rarely have I seen such clear evidence of systematic abuse and coordinated intimidation. She granted temporary custody to the mothers, with supervised visitation for the fathers who completed anger management courses. The men erupted, shouting about bias, about their rights, about injustice, but the bailiffs were already moving, maintaining order. As we filed out, Mr. Frank caught my eye. The look he gave me was pure hatred. This isn't over, he mouthed. He was right. The legal battles continued, but now we had momentum. The temporary custody orders gave us breathing room. The supervised visitations meant the children were safe during exchanges. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. 3 months into our new life, something shifted. The harassment slowed, then stopped. The phone calls ended. No more vandalism, no more threats. At first, we were suspicious. Was this a new tactic? A way to lull us into complacency? Then Catherine called with news. They're being investigated, she said, barely containing her excitement. The prosecutor from 3 towns over? She didn't just file charges for domestic violence. She forwarded evidence to the state attorney. Conspiracy, witness intimidation, organized harassment. This is bigger than family court now. The state investigation moved slowly but thoroughly. Financial records were subpoenaed, phone records examined. The coordination between the men, once their strength, became evidence of conspiracy. They'd been so careful to document our every move, they'd forgotten they were documenting their own crimes too. One by one, they started turning on each other. Mr. Morrison blamed Mr. Frank for the escalation. The police chief tried to claim he was gathering evidence to help. Mr. Chen insisted he was just going along with the group, afraid to dissent. Their united front crumbled under legal pressure. During this time, we focused on healing. The kids started therapy, processing not not just the recent trauma, but years of living in fear. Support groups help the mothers reclaim their identities beyond survivor. I threw myself into writing, documenting our story not for evidence, but for understanding. Yasmin and I grew closer through shared experience. We'd spend hours talking about our futures, dreams that had nothing to do with our fathers or their violence. She wanted to become a counselor, help kids like us. I wanted to tell stories that mattered, give voice to the voiceless. We're going to be okay, she said one night as we studied for finals in her living room. Different than we planned, but okay. My mother started dating again, tentatively. A kind man from her support group who understood why she flinched at sudden movements, who never raised his voice even when frustrated. Watching her slowly learn to trust again was like watching a flower bloom in slow motion. The other women found their own paths to healing. Mrs. Chen opened a small alterations business, her skilled hands that had hidden bruises now creating beautiful things. Mrs. Williams went back to school, pursuing the nursing degree she'd abandoned when she got married. Rebecca became an advocate, using her knowledge of the system to help other women escape. 6 months after the first custody hearing, we gathered for a different kind of meeting. Not strategy or survival, but celebration. Mrs. Morrison had gotten a promotion. Mrs. Frank's daughter had made honor roll. Small victories that felt monumental because we'd earned them ourselves. I want to thank Pandy, Mrs. Taylor said, raising her glass of sparkling cider, for seeing what everyone else ignored. Pandy, uncomfortable with praise as always, shifted in his seat. I just delivered food, he said. You all did the hard part. No, my mother said firmly. You delivered hope. The investigation culminated in arrests. Early morning raids, handcuffs, perp walks. The men who'd terrorized us for years were led away in chains. Local news covered it briefly. 7 men arrested in domestic violence conspiracy. But we didn't need media validation. We had something better. We had freedom. The trials would come later. More testimony, more reliving of trauma. But now it was on our terms, in a system that finally seemed to be listening. The charges were serious. Conspiracy, intimidation, organized harassment, domestic violence. Prison time was likely. Some people asked if we felt guilty, destroying these men's lives. But they destroyed their own lives the moment they raised their fists. We'd just stopped letting them destroy ours too. As the 1-year anniversary of our escape approached, I started writing our story in full. Not for court or evidence, but for the women still trapped, still believing they had no options. Every word was a reminder that isolation is a cage, but solidarity is a key. My phone buzzed with a text from Yasmin. Pizza night at my place. Mom's trying a new recipe. I smiled, grabbing my jacket. Normal. We'd fought for it, bled for it, testified for it, and now we lived it, one ordinary day at a time. The doorbell rang just as I was leaving. Pandy stood there with our weekly delivery, but also with news. There's a new family, he said quietly. 3 towns over. The wife, she's showing signs. I think she might be ready to hear about options. My mother appeared behind me, already reaching for her phone. I'll call Rebecca. She'll know which resources to connect her with. And so it continued. The network growing, strengthening. 7 women had escaped one night, but we'd built something that would help 70 more, 700 more. A chain of support that no amount of intimidation could break. Be careful, I told Pandy as he headed back to his car, Benji waiting in the passenger seat. Always am, he said with a small smile. Deliveries to make. As I walked to Yasmin's apartment, I thought about cycles. How violence perpetuates until someone breaks the pattern. How silence enables until someone speaks. How isolation kills until someone reaches out. We'd broken our cycles, found our voices, reached out and found hands reaching back. The men who'd tried to break us were facing justice, but that was just the ending of one story. The beginning of another was being written every day, in small apartments filled with laughter, in courtrooms where truth finally mattered, in pizza boxes that might contain more than food. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother. Pick up ice cream on your way? The good kind. We're celebrating. What are we celebrating? I texted back. Tuesday, she replied. We made it to another Tuesday. I understood. Every day we lived free was a celebration. Every choice we made for ourselves was a victory. Every moment of peace was earned. The corner store clerk smiled as I grabbed 2 pints of chocolate chip cookie dough. Special occasion? Yeah, I said, smiling back. It's Tuesday. She looked confused, but rang me up anyway. She couldn't know that Tuesday meant freedom, meant survival, meant a group of women who'd saved each other and were still saving others. As I climbed the stairs to Yasmin's apartment, I could hear laughter inside. Real laughter, not the nervous kind that tries to diffuse tension. The door opened before I could knock, Yasmin grinning widely. About time. Mom's been waiting to start the movie. Inside, the living room was crowded with familiar faces. Our mothers, our siblings, our chosen family. The coffee table was laden with pizza and snacks. Someone had strung up fairy lights, casting a warm glow over everything. What movie are we watching? I asked, settling onto the floor with the other kids. Something with a happy ending, Mrs. Williams said firmly. We've earned those. As the movie started, I looked around the room. Bruises had faded, smiles came easier. The hypervigilance was still there. We all still checked exits, still startled at loud noises, but it was manageable. We were healing. My phone lit up with a notification. An email from Catherine with good news. The final custody arrangements had been approved. Full custody to the mothers, visitation only after successful completion of extensive therapy and anger management. The subject line read simply, you won. But sitting there, surrounded by survivors who'd become family, I realized we'd won something bigger than custody. We'd won the right to exist without fear, to make choices without permission, to live without apology. The movie played on, but I wasn't watching. I was thinking about tomorrow, next week, next year. The stories I'd write, the women we'd help, the cycles we'd continue breaking. It wouldn't be easy. Healing never was, but it would be ours. You okay? Yasmin whispered, noticing my distraction. Yeah, I said, meaning it completely. I'm good. And I was. We all were. Not perfect, not unmarked by our experiences, but good. Free. Together. It was enough. It was everything.